The airport sniffer dogs rushed toward a suitcase and wouldn't budge from it until a crowd of officers gathered around. After a round of security checks, the airport police finally opened the box. What they found inside was so heartbreaking, it brought tears to their eyes. In the busy halls of Beirut International Airport, Officer Nasser and his dog partner Jim were making their usual patrol. Jim, a German shepherd trained to sniff out anything suspicious, usually did his job with quiet focus. But today, something unexpected turned their regular shift into something much more serious. As they walked through the airport, surrounded by the constant movement of travelers and luggage, Jim suddenly perked up. His pace quickened as they neared a plain-looking suitcase that had arrived from Ukraine. There wasn't anything special about the suitcase. It looked like any other sitting in the cargo area. But for some reason, Jim was locked onto it. Normally, when Jim picked up on something odd, he would bark loudly and repeatedly, alerting everyone around. But this time, something different happened. Instead of barking, Jim let out a low whine, then darted toward the suitcase. He stopped suddenly and crouched low, visibly shaken. Officer Nasser watched in surprise. After years of working with Jim, Officer Nasser knew something was very wrong. The dog, who was always calm and focused during their checks, was acting like he had found something far outside their usual routine. Nasser felt that familiar gut feeling. This wasn't normal. The suitcase had come all the way from Ukraine, and if you looked closely, there were tiny holes along its sides. Jim sniffed at the holes carefully. Each time he pulled back as if something inside smelled terrible, something only he could sense. Officer Nasser knew better than to take chances. Any unknown package could be dangerous. It might contain drugs, weapons, or even a hidden explosive. He called it in, and the airport staff quickly contacted the bomb disposal team. Wearing full protective gear, the bomb squad carefully moved the suitcase into a secured room away from the busy terminal. Tension filled the air. Staff members whispered to each other, their eyes shifting between the sealed room and Jim, who remained strangely restless, his tail moving with nervous energy. Inside, the bomb disposal team went to work. They ran their usual checks, every move precise and controlled. Outside the room, officers waited quietly, exchanging quiet guesses about what could be inside. Jim sat nearby, still alert and focused, like he knew something they didn't. Finally, the bomb squad came out. One of them gave a quick nod. There were no explosives inside. The danger that had once loomed over the airport was now gone. But the mystery wasn't. Even with the all clear from the bomb squad, the officers still had no answer to one big question. What had made Jim react like that? The German shepherd was still restless, more worked up than usual. The officers, trained to read the signals of dogs like Jim, could tell something wasn't sitting right with him. It was like he was trying to tell them something more than usual. Technically, they could have just sent the box back to storage and waited for the security team to check it with the infrared scanner. But Jim's behavior was just too intense to brush off. So they decided to take a closer look. The little holes in the box, which had seemed like nothing at first, now felt like a clue they'd missed. Officer Nasser leaned in and ran his fingers along the edges of the holes. That's when a faint smell hit him, something subtle, but clearly not right. It was enough to make everything fall into place. Jim had definitely picked up on something. The fear of explosives was gone, but now there was a different kind of tension. Everyone could feel it. Something living was inside that box. The officers all agreed they needed to open it. Slowly, carefully, they moved in. Every action was deliberate, and the room grew quieter with each passing second. As Officer Nasser lifted the lid, no one knew what to expect. Then came the shock. Inside the box, curled up in sawdust, were 3 tiny Siberian tiger cubs. The light pouring into the box startled them. They blinked and stayed huddled together, unsure of what was happening. The room fell into stunned silence. Nobody moved. Officer Nasser was frozen, speechless. No one could believe what they were seeing. The discovery of the tiger cubs hit hard. This wasn't just about airport security anymore. This was something deeper, something heartbreaking. The officers gently began lifting the cubs out of the box, and the more they saw, the worse it got. These animals, meant to roam the wild, had been shoved into a crate without any care or thought for their needs. They were frightened and confused. Small growls slipped from their throats as they tried to make sense of their new surroundings. The room was still quiet, but now for a different reason. The weight of what had just been uncovered settled over everyone like a blanket. How long had these cubs been locked away like this, hidden from the sun, the air, the world? Their fur was dirty, matted with waste and sawdust. The smell was sharp, the kind that stuck in your throat. Parasites and worms crawled across their skin, and it was clear these cubs had been suffering for a while. Their once beautiful coats were now crawling with signs of neglect. Seeing them like that broke everyone's heart. Tears welled up in more than one officer's eyes. How had a box like this, filled with so much pain, made it all the way here without anyone noticing? How had this box made it through security in the airport it came from? And who was supposed to pick it up? Right now, nobody had those answers. But as the officers gently lifted the tiger cubs out of the crate, they quickly contacted the right authorities to start finding out. That's when the story of these little ones slowly began to unfold. The cubs were born in a zoo in Ukraine and were meant to be sent to the Samar al-Husseinawi Zoo in Damascus as part of an animal trade. But somewhere along the way, the people handling the transfer ignored the rules. Instead of being transported with care, the cubs were packed into a crate with no food, no water, and no attention to their needs. Officer Nasser, who was used to dealing with people, now found himself trying to figure out how to help these helpless animals. The cubs were weak and clearly dehydrated, their fur tangled and dirty. Wanting to do something, anything, the airport staff grabbed blankets and bottled water from a nearby break room. Right there in the terminal, they set up a makeshift bed to give the cubs a bit of comfort. But they all knew this wasn't enough. They were in over their heads. Thankfully, animal control arrived not long after. The cubs were taken to a safe place where they could finally get the care they desperately needed. Each one was given a name: Maya, Tanya, and Anton. They quickly became symbols of quiet strength. Even after everything they'd been through, they were still fighting. And now, thanks to the team from Animal Control, they had a real shot at a better life. The shelter that took them in specialized in animals who'd been through hard times. There, experienced veterinarians and caregivers were ready and waiting. Maya, Tanya, and Anton were placed in a quiet recovery space where their healing could begin. The first exams showed just how much they had suffered. They were dehydrated, malnourished, and clearly traumatized from their time in the crate. The vets got to work right away. The cubs were given fluids to rehydrate them and put on a special feeding plan to help them regain strength. The shelter became more than a safe place. It became a turning point in their young lives. For the first time in who knows how long, the cubs were warm, fed, and cared for. Back at the airport, the officers couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. They wanted answers. More importantly, they wanted accountability. Someone had let this happen, and they didn't want it swept under the rug. They also hoped that by telling the story, more people would see just how important it is to treat animals with respect, no matter where they're from or where they're headed. The tiger cubs' journey, hard as it was, had opened people's eyes. In the most unexpected place, a busy airport, something beautiful had happened. A group of everyday people had become heroes. And through all the questions that followed, more of the story came to light. The cubs had been part of a litter born at a zoo in Ukraine. From the moment they were born, their lives were shaped by human decisions. They were meant to be traded for other wild animals, and according to the zoo director, the deal had been done legally. Vladimir Topchi, the zoo's head, insisted that everything had been handled properly, with customs paperwork and official declarations to back it up. But the truth was far from what had been claimed. The crate that showed up at Beirut International Airport had no labels, no paperwork, and didn't meet any of the international transport standards. It didn't follow rules set by groups like IATA or CITES, even though the 4-month-old Siberian tigers were clearly protected under those regulations. There weren't even basic details on the crate, like copper down signs to mark what was inside. The dirty, cramped conditions made it clear that this wasn't just a mistake. It was a failure that crossed borders. As more details came out, attention quickly turned to the zoo director in Ukraine, the one behind the whole plan. Investigators started digging into how these cubs were shipped, and what they found only raised more questions. The cubs had been traded away, but there was no record of how they were supposed to be transported or what condition they were in. The more people heard about it, the more upset they became. News of the tiger cubs' rescue spread fast, and the public reaction was a mix of anger and empathy. People everywhere were talking about it. The story of how airport officers and one smart dog helped save these animals touched hearts around the world. Social media lit up with posts about the dangers of wildlife trafficking and how badly better rules were needed to protect animals like these. Animal rights groups stepped in quickly. Using proof gathered by Animals Lebanon, they pushed hard for action. They asked a Lebanese judge to let them take in the cubs and give them proper care. Just a week later, the judge said yes. Jason Meir, the executive director of Animals Lebanon, and his team wasted no time. They moved fast to make sure the tiger cubs would be safe and cared for. The case didn't stop there. The court ruling stirred up something bigger, a push to hold people accountable and change how animals are moved across countries. International wildlife groups started taking a closer look at the current rules. They began pushing for tighter laws and better protections to make sure something like this wouldn't happen again. What happened to these cubs wasn't just a one-time story. It became a symbol of a larger problem, the way exotic animals are often treated more like objects than living creatures. In response, Animals Lebanon teamed up with global conservation groups to build stronger systems for animal transport. Their work wasn't just about saving Maya, Tanya, and Anton. It was about making sure no other animals would have to go through the same suffering. Once the cubs were officially placed in Animals Lebanon's care, their new life began. But it wasn't easy at first. After spending weeks in a cramped box, the open space of their new enclosure felt overwhelming. Caretakers moved slowly, watching the cubs closely and giving them time to adjust at their own pace. Maya, the smallest, was shy but curious. She slowly began exploring, taking cautious steps out into the open. Tanya was more careful, hanging back and observing everything. Anton, the biggest of the three, surprised everyone by jumping right into play, showing bursts of energy and excitement. Each cub reacted in their own way, but for the first time, they were safe, and they had room to be themselves. As the cubs settled into their new home, their unique personalities began to shine through. They cautiously explored their surroundings, slowly getting used to the freedom they'd never known before. To help them recover from the trauma they'd been through, Animals Lebanon brought in animal behaviorists. These experts observed how the cubs interacted and kept a close eye out for signs of fear or stress. To help stimulate their minds and instincts, the team introduced enrichment activities. They placed toys, climbing areas, and treats around the enclosure, small things that gave the cubs something to do and encouraged healthy, natural behaviors. It helped them feel safe, and slowly, things started to feel normal. Part of the healing process also meant helping the cubs learn to trust humans again. Caretakers spent quiet time near the enclosure, letting the cubs get used to their presence. With time, Maya, Tanya, and Anton began to understand that the people around them meant no harm. They were there to help. Over the next few weeks, the changes in the cubs were incredible. Their fur, once dirty and full of parasites, became soft and healthy again thanks to careful grooming and treatments. The effects of starvation faded as they eagerly ate the nutritious meals the staff prepared each day. But even more powerful than the physical recovery was the emotional shift. Where there had once been fearful growls and wide, frightened eyes, there was now calm curiosity and growing confidence. They began to move through their space with ease, no longer hiding or flinching. They were finally starting to feel safe. While Siberian tigers are typically solitary animals, these three had been through something unique together. Their shared experience had created a bond, and the caretakers recognized how important that connection was. So instead of separating them, they let Maya, Tanya, and Anton stay together. That companionship became a comfort. They leaned on each other during this new chapter in their lives. The success of their recovery didn't go unnoticed. Local communities, animal lovers, and wildlife groups from around the world began to pay attention. New partnerships were formed, with organizations coming together to share what they'd learned. The journey of these 3 cubs became more than just a story. It became an example of how rescued animals can heal and how their stories can help others. Every step of their journey offered something valuable: insight, lessons, and hope. What Maya, Tanya, and Anton had gone through became a guide for others working to rescue animals trapped in illegal wildlife trade. But their story wasn't over yet. Plans were already being made to give the cubs a chance to live in a more natural setting. Conversations with trusted sanctuaries and conservation groups were underway to find a safe place where the cubs could live closer to how they were meant to, in an environment where they could grow, explore, and play freely. What a powerful story of survival and kindness. Watching Maya, Tanya, and Anton come back from such a dark beginning has been nothing short of inspiring. What would you do if you opened a suitcase and found animals like these inside? Do you think the people responsible got the punishment they deserved? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and if this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real stories that need to be told. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.